So the Philippines warns China about crossing while they challenge U.S. helicopters. Listen, a lot of people have been linking this over, also saying that clearly this whole entire time you guys have been doing illegal things, illegal bounds. You are trying to do something that isn't yours. At this point, you're trying to take the sun. What else do you want, bro? Do you want to rule over the whole world? Do you want to rule over every country? Like, this is doing too much. So the Philippines warned China, but while they were warning China, China then decides to challenge U.S. helicopters. Just watch what happens. It's a big mistake.
At 2:30 p.m. local over the South China Sea, an American helicopter was doing something that made Beijing very nervous. To counter this, they scrambled their best attack helicopter to stop it. But the Chinese pilot didn't know he was about to make a career-ending mistake.
What's crazy is even with the ships, if you don't have improved ships, I don't think you should assume that you're going to have a better I mean, maybe you could, right? Maybe you just focused on having a better helicopter than the US, but then you forgot about, ships, submarines, everything else. I'm a bit confused on why they would do this. This is just not, it is a scare tactic. It's just trying to challenge, but they also did look like they were trying to start an all-out war at this point, because they are pressing and pressing and pressing and locking on, which isn't a funny thing to play with. It's the equivalent of holding a gun to someone's face and being like, what you gonna do? And it's like, okay, what are you doing? Because at this point, it isn't really a scare tactic. You are actually about to start something that you don't want to start.
For the next 72 minutes, while trying to intimidate the most powerful Navy on Earth, this pilot would accidentally teach the Americans something Beijing never wanted them to know. The Chinese Z-10 pilot had been scrambled from Xiamen 28 minutes earlier with orders that basically amounted to go scare off the Americans. The U.S. Navy MH-60 Romeo, think of it as basically the Swiss Army knife of military helicopters, was busy tracking a Chinese-type O-39 diesel submarine. The sub had been submerged for 48 hours and was desperately trying to recharge its batteries.
48 hours. Oh my gosh, I forgot that there's people in those submarines that stay there for days. Anyone who knows anything about submarines, please let me know. What is the longest that people have stayed inside of a submarine, especially in instances like this where there's like a war potentially about to happen, which is, please don't. I hope not. And clearly, it's not going to go very well for either side, but particularly China, it won't go very well for, which is why they're just trying to do imitation tactics at this point. But who knows, man? The ego could take them. Regardless, let me know, what is the longest people have stayed in a submarine for? I actually am curious about that.
So subs are like holding your breath underwater. Eventually, you have to come up for air. And when you do, America is watching. Foreign military aircraft, you are approaching Chinese territorial waters. Alter your course immediately. The transmission crackled over the radio as the Z-10 pilot banked hard across the Romeo's nose at 500 meters. Just one problem. They were 50 nautical miles away from any Chinese territory, in international airspace, where America had every legal right to be. The Romeo's three-person crew, 2 pilots and 1 sensor operator, didn't even flinch, because they knew something Beijing didn't. For the next 72 minutes, while trying to intimidate the U.S. Navy, China was about to do something incredibly stupid. See, the Romeo wasn't just sightseeing. Those bumps and bulges on its fuselage, those are AN/ALQ-210 electronic support measures pods.
That's insane, dog.
Think of them as digital vacuum cleaners, sucking up every electronic emission from that Z-10. Radar frequencies, communication protocols, engine harmonics, everything was being cataloged, while the Chinese pilot thought he was being intimidating. The Z-10 you see flying around here is what happens when you order an Apache helicopter from Wish. Built with...
What? That's crazy. In all seriousness, though, like, the technology has ramped up so much so, and like I've mentioned before in the other video, even with jets costing billions of dollars, like, these things have so much technology, you'd assume from an outside perspective, even growing up as a kid, you'd see a helicopter, you'd think it's cool, just blades and flying and wheels. It's so much more than that, and you'd think it's just guns on it too. It's not. there's so much more to it that honestly shocks you the more you see it. Like it is shocking me. Like this is so insane, the improvements of technology, especially with the US being the catalyst, I should say, right? The one who basically created the idea of like really, really good helicopters. Correct me if I'm wrong. But from what he was saying in the beginning of the narration as well, saying that, you know, this is the Swiss Army knife, basically the one. And a lot of people did mention that the United States has a lot of particular military, which is why this is actually perfect for the Philippines as a ally. The Philippines has a perfect ally in a situation like this because it is the Swiss Army knife of helicopters, Swiss Army knife of, I guarantee, other things as well. It's crazy.
Leftover Russian design assistance from the 1990s. When Russia needed cash and China needed helicopters, sure, it looks intimidating with its angular design. But so does a Toyota Camry with a body kit. Beijing's pilot fired 2 flares around the Romeo. This wasn't an attack, it was theater. The aviation equivalent of a chihuahua barking at a pit bull. The American crew's response? They pointed their dipping sonar directly at the submarine below. The message was crystal clear. We still see your friend down there. The submarine, realizing it was still being tracked despite the aerial interference, crash-dived in a panic. It made so much noise, cavitation from the emergency dive, hull popping from pressure changes, that sensors across the entire carrier strike group heard it.
So bro just like, he hung the thing down, showing that, yo, I could just drop this any second, by the way. What would you even do in that situation? Let's say that you guys were trying to, or you're the ones in the helicopter or the submarine. Like, besides the obvious run away or quickly dive, what would you be thinking in your head? Would you be thinking like, I've made a mistake and that's it? Or would you be thinking like, there is no way that this is happening right now. I thought that maybe this or maybe that. Like, what would you even be thinking?
Marine warfare, noise equals destruction. And the Chinese pilot had just punched his own submarine's ticket while trying to protect it, if this had been a real war. But Beijing's pilot was about to discover something worse. Much worse. At 2:48 p.m., after 18 minutes of failed intimidation, the Chinese pilot finally thought he'd achieved something. His fire control radar got a lock on the Romeo. The warbling tone in his headset meant he could finally simulate an engagement.
Dude, the locking again, even if they don't shoot, why would you do that? It's the equivalent of pointing a weapon at someone. It is literally pointing a weapon at someone. Why would you even think of doing that? Because it doesn't even work as intimidation. It just works as like you're about to start something that you won't win. Quite literally. And the worst part is it's always like a pissing battle. You know what I mean? It's something that I feel isn't even worth it, but it's constant pissing battle. You know you're going to lose, bro. Just accept it.
That confidence lasted exactly 3 seconds.
You're not supposed to be doing this anyways.
That's how long it took for Americans to stop laughing and flip a switch.
Okay.
What happened next was the electronic warfare equivalent of bringing a super soaker to fight Navy SEALs. A nearby EA-18 Growler started blasting the Z-10 with electromagnetic energy using its ALQ-99 jamming pods. Suddenly, the Chinese pilot's radar looked like a TV screen with no signal. His lock didn't just disappear. The American helicopter appeared to split into 12 different contacts. Some were flying backwards, others were apparently teleporting. One showed up inside his own cockpit. This is what happens when 1990s Russian hand-me-down technology meets modern American electronic warfare. The ALQ-99 doesn't just jam radars, it makes them hallucinate. It's frequency agile, hopping across the electromagnetic spectrum faster than the Chinese radar can follow. While Beijing's pilot was looking on one frequency, the jamming had already moved to 50 others. But it got worse. What appeared on his threat display next gave him goosebumps. The U.S. carrier strike group had just lit him up with their spy radars. That's like having the Eye of Sauron suddenly notice you exist.
Yo, the Eye of Sauron, oh, Lord of the Rings,
were already launching from the carrier deck, not to engage, but to remind Beijing that this Romeo wasn't alone. It had the entire U.S. Pacific Fleet behind it.
Protecting the Philippines, man, by the way. being an ally with the Philippines. They also have Japan. It isn't even just the US. They got Japan behind them. They got what again? It was South Korea as well. This isn't even something that's supposed to be happening right now. That's the worst part. It's like, what else do you want more now? Does China want the sun, bro? Do they just want the earth? If you know you're not supposed to be doing this, you're not in bounds to do this, just don't do it. I've countlessly, like how many times countlessly have I mentioned, they shouldn't even have this idea, but they had the idea. Maybe you can have an intrusive thought, right? They get the intrusive thought. What if we just took this sea, international waters? You're not supposed to. So many ships go through here. It's owned by this place and this place. That's it. They're like, what if I just tried to take it? Then you go bully the Philippines. Then you try to challenge the U.S. Like, you understand how ridiculous this is?
The Chinese pilot tried everything, switching frequencies, increasing power, even turning his radar off and on again. Nothing worked. The Romeo's electronic warfare suite operates across multiple bands simultaneously, creating what specialists call the full spectrum dominance experience, or what Chinese pilots call, oh no. Meanwhile, the American crew remained so calm, they were probably discussing lunch plans. They knew in exactly 4 minutes, the situation would get even more embarrassing for China. The Romeo's pilot decided to send another message, a slight bank to point the dipping sonar at the submarine below. The submarine, still being tracked despite all the aerial interference, was now making desperate evasion turns. Each turn created more noise. More noise meant better tracking. The Chinese pilot wasn't helping one bit. The U.S. aircraft commander finally transmitted with the kind of professionalism that only comes from absolute superiority. Chinese military aircraft. This is the United States Navy aircraft.
Yeah, you better stop,
operating
bro.
in international airspace in accordance with international law. We will maintain course and altitude. Translation: nice try, kid. What Beijing didn't realize was that every second was intelligence gold. The amount of data being collected was staggering.
They knew everything you were doing.
Communication protocols showing their encryption was from 2003. Radar frequencies revealing they hadn't updated since buying the Russian design. Even the harmonics of the rotor blades, useful for identifying Z-10s from 50 miles away just by sound. But the Chinese pilot wasn't done embarrassing himself. He was about to learn why that was exactly the wrong move. The Z-10 had just entered what Americans call the find out stage. Frustrated.
Yeah, I already know. They say the F around and find out. That's the stage, basically.
By his complete electronic failure, Beijing's pilot closed to 500 meters, thinking proximity would help. At this distance, he could see the American door gunner manning the GAU-21 50 caliber machine gun, not pointing at him yet. But the message was clear. Now the real mismatch became apparent. The Chinese pilot initiated thumping, aggressive maneuvers designed to force a defensive response. The Z-10 suddenly began lunging left and right, pitching up and down in sharp bursts, like a boxer throwing feints to bait a reaction. Each move tried to shove the Romeo into a bad firing position, but the tight turns tanked its airspeed and pushed the Z-10's airframe to its G limit. The Romeo, built on the Black Hawk's proven airframe, can pull significantly higher G-loads while maintaining stable flight. Beijing's pilot was essentially tuckering himself out while the Americans watched. Meanwhile, the sensor warfare was completely one-sided. The Romeo's AN/AAR-47 missile warning system was tracking every aspect of the Z-10's movement. Maximum turn rate, 20 degrees per second. Climb performance, 12 meters per second. This data would later determine exactly how to program American missiles to intercept these helicopters.
And you know how long it takes to even go through all these things? Like, a lot of people feel that it may be, a little bit easier. At least some people that are ignorant to the fact that it's incredibly difficult to handle a machine that quite literally could change the tides in a battle, in any situation, I would say. Personally, right? I would say it could. I feel like this is the most challenging thing to learn and to be good at, even when you have good technology, because the technology still requires a good pilot, still requires a good person manning certain things. So I do feel that it still is valuable to have that training obviously. Of course, the training is obvious, but I mean, to have good training at that.
The Z-10 was providing its own defeat instructions. The Romeo's FLIR camera was recording everything in 1080p infrared. Every hotspot was being cataloged. Exhaust ports at 450 degrees Celsius. Transmission housing at 180 degrees. These thermal signatures would tell American engineers exactly where heat-seeking missiles should aim. The Chinese pilot was literally providing a tutorial on how to destroy his helicopter. And if he thought his own weapons could tip the balance, he was in for another shock. The Z-10's 23mm cannon has an effective range of maybe 2,500 meters against ground targets. Against a maneuvering helicopter, lucky to hit anything at 500 meters. The Romeo's GAU-21 has an effective range of nearly 2,000 meters with armor-piercing incendiary rounds that would punch through the Z-10's cabin like tissue paper, which, given Chinese manufacturing standards, it basically was. By now, the Z-10's warning panel looked like a Christmas tree.
That's insane.
The control inputs were getting mushy. His helicopter seemed to be on the verge of literally flying itself to pieces. The Chinese pilot felt the stick fighting him, but running meant court-martial. He switched the warnings to silent and pushed harder for one last maneuver. He attempted radar locks 14 times. Each attempt was a gift to American electronic warfare specialists. The Romeo's systems logged every frequency hop, every pulse pattern, every desperate attempt to—
And this is just radar locking, not locking on, per se, right?
—burn through jamming. It's like watching someone repeatedly try the wrong password while you write down each attempt. When Beijing's pilot attempted laser designation with his electro-optical system, the Romeo sensors didn't just detect it. They identified the exact model and software version. This meant America now knew how to jam not just this helicopter, but every Chinese vehicle using the same systems. One helicopter encounter just compromised an entire generation of Chinese weapons.
It's over.
The stress was becoming visible now. The Z-10's engines were running at 105% maximum continuous power, creating an infrared bloom 40% brighter than normal operations. The Romeo's FLIR documented this in exquisite detail. Future American missiles would be programmed to recognize this exact thermal pattern. When a Z-10 pushes hard, it literally lights itself up for targeting. The electronic intelligence collection was even more damaging. Every communication between the pilot and ground control was being intercepted. The frequency hopping pattern was predictable. American systems could now predict and jam Chinese military communications across the entire theater. As the encounter dragged on, the Z-10's performance degraded visibly, hydraulic pressure dropping from overheating, transmission temperature climbing into the red zone, flight controls becoming sluggish from overtaxed servos. The helicopter was literally defeating itself through overexertion. At 3:42 p.m., the Chinese pilot watched the Romeo's dipping sonar splash into the water again.
This was all in an hour.
The submarine below was still being tracked. After 72 minutes, he hadn't moved the Americans an inch. His thumb hovered over the transmit button to report his failure and decided ground control already knew. They were watching the same radar picture he was. The American crew had accumulated 72 minutes of intelligence gold. Electronic warfare systems would know exactly which frequencies to jam. Missiles would know exactly where to aim. Tactical computers would know exactly how to outmaneuver it. This revelation makes the message to China clear.
Yeah.
Stick to making knockoff iPhones.
Whoa.
Bye for now.
Dang, bro. They gotta always do that.
How good you been living? Wait, how good you been living? I've been living too good for you. I've been living too. Did what I did and I do it again. Every move that I make, I ain't feeling repent. Nobody believes to believe it's a friend, and you question your moves like you really won't end. Really?